Congratulations, Anna, Mark said, grinning across the table. You've been selected for a strategic reassignment. The words tasted like poison disguised as praise. No choice, no warning, just a transfer notice that cut my salary and erased my title. HR called it career mobility. I called it what it was: burial by relocation. I smiled, nodded, and took the folder they handed me. They thought they'd buried me quietly in Kansas. What they didn't realize was, I wrote the policy that would bury them. Before I continue, where are you watching from? You'll want to see how this one turns out. Mark Dalton leaned back in his chair, the kind of grin people wear when they've already decided your fate. Anna, you've been selected for a strategic reassignment, he said, sliding a folder across the conference table like it was a gift. Leslie from HR sat beside him, smiling too tightly to be sincere. I didn't open the folder right away. I already knew what was inside. Mark continued. Fleet Sync needs your expertise in our Midwest division, Kansas City. We're counting on you to stabilize operations out there. His tone made out there sound like exile. It'll be a great opportunity for you to rebuild. I flipped through the packet. Relocation notice, new salary details, and a cost of living adjustment that slashed my pay from $210,000 to $125,000. My title, Senior Director of Operations, was gone. Now I was Regional Process Advisor, a downgrade dressed in corporate jargon. I felt the heat rise in my throat, but I stayed still. 8 years of service, 3 system launches, a spotless record, and they were burying me in a dead office to clear the payroll before bonus season. You'll have a week to confirm acceptance, Leslie added sweetly. If we don't hear back, we'll consider it voluntary separation. I looked up at both of them. So this is how loyalty gets rewarded? Mark's smile didn't waver. Adaptability, Anna. It's how we move forward. I nodded once, pretending to understand. What they didn't realize was, I'd written the policy that made this kind of move their biggest mistake. When I got home that night, I didn't pour a drink or call anyone to vent. I sat at my dining table, opened my laptop, and typed Fleet Sync Relocation Policy Internal. The search bar spun for a second before spitting out the document I hadn't looked at in 5 years. I clicked it, and my own words appeared on the screen. I remembered writing it back when I was in compliance, long before promotions buried me under titles and meetings. It was a policy meant to protect employees from being uprooted without consent, ironically approved by Mark himself during his first year as Chief Growth Officer. I scrolled down, and there it was. Any reassignment or relocation exceeding 50 miles from an employee's primary work location, if not accepted voluntarily in writing, shall be deemed a constructive reassignment triggering full severance benefits and immediate vesting of all retention equity. My pulse steadied. Kansas City was 612 miles away. They hadn't asked for my written consent. They'd sent an email, not a contract, and that single oversight turned their punishment into a payout. I downloaded the file, printed 3 copies, and highlighted every relevant line in yellow. Then I cross-checked the policy's version history. It was still active, untouched since my original draft. No one had ever revised it, no one had deleted it, and no one had realized that it carried the same legal weight as an executive clause. I remembered the night I wrote it, staying late after everyone left, crafting language that would prevent employees from being treated like disposable parts. I hadn't written it for myself back then, but somehow it had survived every restructuring, every HR overhaul. Now it sat in my downloads folder like an old weapon rediscovered. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the printed pages. Every signature, every approval chain, Mark Dalton's name, Leslie Brandt's initials, even the old CFO's digital stamp, confirmed its legitimacy. They'd made me sign hundreds of documents over the years, but this one had outlived them all. They'd built their trap without realizing the floor they stood on was mine. They thought they'd sent me away quietly, but the moment I read that policy header, I knew I wouldn't be the one leaving empty-handed. The next morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building was empty except for the janitor vacuuming near reception. I went straight to my office, closed the door, and began collecting evidence. Not out of anger, out of precision. I printed the relocation notice, the HR email, and the cost of living spreadsheet Leslie had attached. I saved every file twice, one to my personal drive, one to an encrypted external. The timestamps were clear. None of this had been discussed with me beforehand. Every action they took was unilateral. I dug deeper into my archived inbox and found something better, meeting minutes from an executive roundtable 2 weeks earlier. Mark had written, "Need to rotate legacy leadership before Q4 to avoid vesting impact." It wasn't even coded language. It was a confession dressed as strategy. I screenshotted the line and attached it to my folder labeled Constructive Reassignment Evidence. Then I opened my performance reviews. The last 3 were glowing. Exceeded expectations, key asset to operational efficiency, high retention value. No disciplinary notes, no negative metrics. They couldn't claim performance. That meant their move was financial, not operational. A textbook trigger for the clause. By 9 a.m., I had a binder full of proof and a digital trail that told a perfect story of cause and effect. But paper wasn't enough. FleetSync's internal system logged every HR action through its compliance software. Ironically, a system I'd helped design. I logged in, searched my employee ID, and pulled the audit record for my reassignment. It showed the request originated from Mark's account, approved by Leslie, and processed automatically by HR operations without employee consent. Every field marked employee acknowledgement pending. That one unchecked box was the crack in their wall. I exported the log to PDF and encrypted it under the file name Section 64 Audit. The irony made me smile. It sounded like a classified military file. Around noon, I walked to the break room, calm, invisible. Mark passed by, phone pressed to his ear, giving orders to someone about transition messaging. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. In his mind, I was already gone. That worked in my favor. I returned to my office, opened a new email draft addressed to my attorney contact, and wrote only 3 sentences. Possible constructive reassignment under Policy 6.4. Documentation attached. Need consultation. I didn't hit send yet. Timing mattered more than emotion. The best revenge isn't loud, it's scheduled. I backed everything up one final time, labeled the USB drive, and slipped it into a small envelope marked personal. Before I left, I printed one more item. My original compliance policy draft with my signature and timestamp from the archive. It was proof that I didn't just follow the rules. I wrote them. As I locked my drawer, I realized this wasn't just documentation. It was an obituary for their arrogance, written in company letterhead and signed by their own hands. 2 days later, I walked into HR with the same calm tone I used during performance audits. Leslie greeted me like nothing was wrong, pretending the assignment was a formality. "Anna, so glad you came by. We just need your signature to finalize the transition." I sat down across from her desk, opened the folder she slid toward me, and read it silently. The document used polished phrases: reallocation of expertise, geographic optimization, mutual benefit. It was corporate poetry hiding corporate cruelty. I pointed at one line. "This says my relocation is effective November 1st. Does that mean payroll will adjust automatically?" Leslie nodded. "Yes, our system updates once it's approved in workflow." "Good," I said, sliding the paper back. "Then I'll need a digital copy. I'll respond in writing." She blinked, confused. "Of course, but we do need your signature today." I smiled. "Not yet. Policy 6.4 requires voluntary consent. I'll submit my acceptance electronically if I decide." Her pen froze midair. I stood up, thanked her, and left. That single conversation was enough. When HR entered my pending acceptance into the system, the compliance software, yes, the one I designed, registered the relocation as non-voluntary. Within minutes, an automatic alert generated a flag to legal. Potential constructive reassignment, review required. The system didn't care about intentions, only definitions. 50 miles was the threshold. Kansas City was over 600. It triggered the severance protocol automatically. I didn't lift a finger. By 2 p.m., legal's operations channel lit up with internal chatter. I watched from my office window as Leslie hurried into Mark's office, closing the blinds. 15 minutes later, an email arrived in my inbox from Fleet Sync Legal, Notification Policy Exception Review. I clicked it. It was a templated notice confirming a pending review for involuntary relocation exceeding 50 miles. The irony nearly made me laugh. They'd built an automation loop that now treated me like a whistleblower. I left my office at 5 sharp, no goodbyes. That night, I sat on my couch, phone buzzing with notifications from coworkers who'd received relocation orders of their own. Mark was sweeping the leadership floor before bonus cycle, hiding it under strategic decentralization. He thought he was clever, but every one of those relocations would trigger the same compliance flag once processed. I hadn't planned to expose him beyond my case, but by the time HR logged the rest, the system would pull them all into the same audit. It wasn't revenge, it was math. Thursday morning, the first crack appeared, a message from IT, System Audit Freeze, Policy Automation Error under Review. By noon, payroll locked new transactions company-wide. Executives panicked. Legal demanded temporary suspension of Policy 6.4 enforcement. But the rule was hard-coded into the compliance software. It couldn't be overridden without board approval. Mark called me that afternoon. "Anna, we're having a few technical hiccups. Did you notice any system flags on your end?" I kept my voice flat. "I received a notification about relocation review. Why?" He hesitated. "It's just a back-end thing, nothing to worry about." "Of course," I said. "Let me know if I can help." He hung up before replying. The next morning, IT tried manually deleting the relocation records. The system flagged them as tampering attempts and forwarded the log to internal audit. That's when the panic spread. Executives started calling compliance directly, demanding explanations for frozen payrolls and halted bonus calculations. I didn't respond. My role had already been marked transitional. I simply watched as their own automation enforced the policy they ignored. By Friday, the board's general counsel was copied on every thread containing my name. That weekend, the entire relocation initiative was suspended pending review. They'd tried to bury me in Kansas, but now their own system was digging them out, line by line, clause by clause, exactly as written. Monday began with silence, the kind that feels heavy before a storm. When I entered the building, people weren't talking, they were whispering. Something had shifted. I passed the HR wing and saw 2 desks empty, screens locked, chairs pushed in. Leslie's door was closed. Through the glass, I saw stacks of printed reports covering her table. Red headers flashed across each page. Audit Exception Policy 6.4. I went straight to my office, powered up my laptop, and found over 20 unread system notifications waiting. Legal, payroll, compliance, all referencing the same subject line, relocation audit chain. My quiet act had triggered a domino effect. When the system marked my transfer as involuntary, it didn't isolate the case. It automatically scanned all relocations in the current fiscal quarter. 5 other executives had been reassigned in similar fashion, each beyond the 50-mile threshold, none with written consent. Each file carried the same internal note from Mark's account. Confirm reassignment prior to vesting date. The algorithm flagged them all. Legal had no choice but to open simultaneous cases, which froze payroll across departments. By noon, finance suspended executive bonus processing until the matter was resolved. By 1, investors started asking questions. The company's cost optimization plan now looked like an intentional scheme to avoid contractual obligations. The same spreadsheets Mark used to justify my demotion were now being dissected by auditors for pattern analysis. My inbox lit up with indirect panic, people forwarding updates, asking if I'd heard anything. I responded to no one. I simply watched as the layers peeled away. In the afternoon, an emergency town hall was announced. Hazel, the CEO, appeared on video conference with her usual composure cracked around the edges. "We're undergoing a systems review related to relocation compliance," she said. "Operations will continue as normal." But everyone knew nothing was normal. The meeting lasted 7 minutes before someone from IT accidentally shared a screen showing a spreadsheet titled Executive Severance Exposure 4.8 Minors. The chat window exploded before the feed was abruptly cut. Within hours, internal Slack threads lit up. Anonymous comments, screenshots, speculation. Did someone trigger 6.4? They said one director's transfer started the cascade. Legal's freaking out. My phone buzzed continuously. I put it face down. I wasn't going to explain. By Tuesday, news reached the board. An external audit firm was hired overnight to validate process integrity. Mark looked exhausted, his confident gait replaced with brisk, tight movements. I saw him once in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, muttering about containment. He didn't make eye contact. The relocation initiative was now classified as frozen pending legal review, and every executive severance clause was re-evaluated. HR staff were pulled into daily meetings to review documentation that didn't exist. The irony was almost too perfect. The same team that had weaponized policy language against employees was now trapped by it, trying to find an escape clause that wasn't there. Late that afternoon, I received a message from payroll. Action required. Your account pending severance eligibility review. I smiled. The system was aligning with the inevitable. Each audit confirmation increased my leverage. Every file they uncovered confirmed my case was airtight. They were cornered by compliance code written to protect fairness, code they ignored until it bit back. Wednesday brought another escalation. The CFO issued an internal memo to the board estimating potential liability between 1.2 men or 1.8 mailers per case if adjudicated under Policy 6.4. The board demanded an emergency meeting with legal. That night, emails circulated quietly about leadership accountability. Mark's name was mentioned twice, Leslie's 3 times. HR called in sick the next morning. Thursday at 10:00 a.m., the company intranet posted an official notice. Executive relocation program suspended indefinitely pending external review. I stared at the headline for a long time, realizing the scale had grown beyond me. My single relocation had become the epicenter of a corporate quake. People who had been silent during my demotion now walked past me with cautious glances, like I carried contagion. In truth, I carried only documentation and patience. Every arrogant decision they made had been logged, time-stamped, and indexed by a system they never bothered to understand. They'd thought of compliance as paperwork. I'd always known it was a weapon. By Friday morning, the tension had turned physical. Doors shut faster, footsteps quickened, and people avoided eye contact in the hallways. At 8:30, my inbox chimed with an invitation titled Urgent Executive Review, 9 a.m. The location, main conference room, 15th floor. I walked in to find the entire upper tier waiting. Hazel, the CEO, expression strained but measured. Mark, eyes shadowed, trying to look composed. Leslie, silent and small in her seat. And a woman I didn't know, probably outside counsel. The air felt like static. Hazel started, her voice controlled. Anna, thank you for coming on such short notice. We've concluded our preliminary audit. She paused, as though choosing words carefully. It appears the relocation procedures you were subjected to violated Policy 6.4 as currently written. I let that hang in the room. Mark shifted, fingers tapping the table. The counsel spoke next. Per the policy's language, which you co-authored, is that correct? The reassignment qualifies as involuntary. You are therefore entitled to full severance and accelerated vesting. Her tone was flat, factual, almost reluctant. I nodded. That's correct. Mark finally spoke. Anna, this isn't what we intended. The relocation strategy was about business needs, not... I cut him off. Intent doesn't matter. Language does. You approved that policy, Mark. Your initials are right next to mine. His mouth opened, then closed. Hazel folded her hands. We're prepared to resolve this immediately, she said. Full severance at your current base, 24 months, plus all equity vesting. I kept my voice even. And the health benefits continuation. Of course. Hazel said quickly. Standard per policy. I could see the relief ripple across the table. They thought this ended with a payout, but I wasn't finished. There's another issue, I said. The other 5 executives reassigned under the same directive. Have they been compensated as well? Hazel hesitated. Mark's jaw tightened. Those cases are under separate review, the counsel said carefully. You'll receive your agreement within the hour. I stood. Good, I'll sign when it's complete, but I want confirmation that the compliance system remains untouched until the full audit concludes. Hazel's gaze flickered. Agreed. I thanked them, turned and left. Outside the room, the air felt cleaner. My phone buzzed 5 minutes later. Email from legal. Settlement agreement attached. I didn't open it yet. I took the elevator down, walked out to the courtyard, and let the cold air cut through the static that had lived in me for weeks. They thought money was the ending. It wasn't. Justice isn't a check. It's recognition, it's exposure. It's knowing that when someone tries to erase you, they end up erasing themselves. Later that afternoon, news spread internally that Mark Dalton had resigned, effective immediately. Leslie was on leave pending review. Hazel issued a company-wide statement promising a renewed commitment to ethical leadership. I sat at my desk, reading the words that would become their corporate apology. The system was quiet again. Payroll unfroze. The panic emails stopped. But the hierarchy that once treated policy as armor had learned it could also be a mirror. They'd built the weapon, handed it to me, and never thought I'd know how to use it. 3 months later, I walked back into Fleet Sync under a different badge color. Same building, same lobby, but this time, my ID read consultant. I'd been hired as an external compliance advisor through a private firm. Ironically, the same one conducting their relocation audit. The pay was nearly double my old salary, and my hours were mine to decide. No subordinates, no forced reassignments, no games. Just policy, structure, and control. The kind of quiet power they'd never understood. People stared when they saw me in the corridors. Some smiled nervously, others avoided eye contact, unsure whether to greet me as a returning colleague or as the ghost who'd walked out with their secrets. I wasn't there for revenge anymore. The revenge had already done its work. I was there to rebuild what they'd broken, to make sure no one else could be exiled under the same false pretense. My first task was rewriting Policy 6.4, stripping out every loophole they'd used to justify manipulation and replacing it with protections for every role, not just executives. When the final draft was ready, I submitted it to legal for review. The new version carried my name at the bottom. Carlisle Amendment 2025. It was approved unanimously by the board within a week. Mark's name was already gone from company memory, erased in updates and replaced by someone younger, quieter, less reckless. Leslie never returned. Hazel stayed on as CEO, now watching every policy memo like it was a live grenade. When I finished the contract term, they offered me a permanent role. I declined. I didn't want permanence. I wanted distance. As I left the building one last time, I paused in the doorway and looked up at the glass facade. The same reflection stared back, but everything behind it had changed. They'd once called it a reassignment. I called it a recalibration. I didn't celebrate when the money cleared or when my name appeared on the new compliance charter. The real victory had come long before that, when I stopped reacting and started observing. That's the thing about power in the workplace. It isn't in titles or offices or who talks the loudest in meetings. It's in the fine print, the quiet lines no one bothers to read. They called what they did to me a relocation, a strategic redeployment. It was supposed to be the end of my story. But policy doesn't care about intentions. It only answers to its own language. I'd written the rule they tried to twist, and in doing so, I'd unknowingly built a safeguard strong enough to turn their ambition into liability. Every form they filed, every approval they rushed through, only bound them tighter to my outcome. I didn't need to destroy anything. I only needed to let their system enforce itself. That's what revenge looks like when it's intelligent. Not fire, not fury, but clarity. A reminder that fairness isn't granted. It's engineered. Now, when people ask how I manage to win, I tell them this: never sign anything you haven't read. Never underestimate the power of the words you write when no one's watching. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't rewriting the rules, it's reminding them who wrote them first. I've had time to think about what really happened at FleetSync, and here's what still stings. It wasn't just a bad decision. It was a culture built on arrogance, the kind where leadership mistakes manipulation for management and assumes that everyone below them will stay quiet forever. They called it strategic realignment, but it was really an act of corporate cowardice, trying to save money by breaking promises and hoping no one remembered the rules. What they forgot is that people like me wrote those rules. I spent years watching leaders treat policies like decorations, something to quote when convenient, to ignore when inconvenient. It's the same flaw I've seen across every industry. They believe the system protects them because they built it. The irony is, it protects whoever understands it. I wasn't a rebel. I was just prepared. And preparation beats arrogance every single time. If there's any advice I'd give, it's this: never assume integrity exists in the room just because someone in a suit says it does. Real integrity shows up in documentation, in signatures, in the fine print that outlives everyone's titles. It's bitter, I know, but it's the truth. The best revenge isn't winning. It's watching the system they built turn on them exactly as written. How to get started today. Read every contract like your future depends on it, because one day it might. Keep a personal archive of your work, your wins, and your agreements. If your company calls something a simple reassignment, slow down and ask for the policy in writing. Learn how compliance works in your field. It's not boring, it's armor. Don't fight fire with fire. Fight it with proof, dates, and signatures. What's one workplace policy you've seen twisted against good people? Share it below. I'd love to see how many of us have lived the same story.